Welcome back to my channel. My name is Kayla and I like to talk about books, book reviews, reading vlogs. Today I'm going to be talking about the book The House Across the Lake by Riley Sager. The House Across the Lake by Riley Sager is a relatively new release. I believe it's only been out for a week or two, so I'm just going to let you know right now this is going to be a spoiler-free summary, synopsis. It's going to be a spoiler-free review as best as I can do that. You're pretty safe if you haven't read it yet, which I'm guessing most people haven't. Sorry, by the way, if I look tired today, it's because I am. So, The House Across the Lake, Riley Sager. I have not read anything by this author before, but I've heard really good things. I know that he's got like a pretty big fan base. He does a lot of kind of thriller, mystery type stuff, so I'm actually kind of curious to read more by him. So if you have any recommendations, please drop them below in the comments, anything he's written, because I think I did mostly enjoy this book. So kind of in total, I mostly enjoyed it, but there's definitely a few bones I have to pick. So we'll kind of get into that, but I'm going to start right now with a summary synopsis, like I said, spoiler free, and then I will get into my review. I'll leave timestamps below if you want to skip any of that, and yeah, let's just start. The House Across the Lake by Riley Sager follows Casey, an actress who has taken a step back from acting following both the death of her husband and then her subsequent kind of drinking problem and some public antics. So she actually decides to take a break at her family lake house, where one of her biggest things that she really does, really all she does, is she relaxes on the porch drinking with her binoculars to observe wildlife, but really just to actually watch what the neighbors are doing. And she specifically watches primarily her neighbors Tom and Catherine. And Tom is like a big tech entrepreneur who I guess invented or came up with the idea for some type of social networking site. They compare it to a lot of the other big ones, so in this world it's apparently a big deal. And Catherine, his wife, is a former model. During all of her time outside basically just watching these people, which definitely is a little bit sus, but she notices Catherine is actually like in trouble one day and actually ends up saving her from drowning. And after she saves her, they end up striking up like a pretty quick but short-lived friendship. But the reason I say short-lived is because one night when Casey is watching their house, she actually witnesses a fight between Catherine and her husband Tom, and it becomes a really heated argument. Catherine like leaves and actually disappears, and nobody can find her for a while after that. But because this is not like that close of a friend of hers, even when she tries to report it, nobody takes Casey all that seriously. And also people are just sort of like, I mean, yeah, is she still posted on social media? It lines up with her husband's story kind of, so they're just like, you know, it's probably no big deal. But she obviously has a feeling, especially after specifically what she witnessed, that just something is not right. So she becomes more and more obsessed with just figuring out where Catherine is, what happened to her, and everything that's going on. And as she does, she uncovers some pretty wild truths. And this is kind of the part where like I just want to lay the groundwork. I don't want to give away any spoilers. But the primary driving force through most of the book is Casey trying to figure out what has happened to Catherine, whether or not her husband is or was involved, all of that. So it's definitely a pretty interesting like mystery idea to begin with. I will just give the warning that it definitely has some big twists at the end, and if you've read it, if you know, you know. Getting into my review, I want to talk a little bit about the characters. Obviously, there aren't actually a lot of characters in this book, and there really aren't a lot of characters that we dive into in a really deep way. The primary character and the vessel through which we see the story unfold is obviously Casey. She's kind of our protagonist. She's an adequate main character, I would say. Like, she gets the job done. What I do appreciate is that what we know of her flaws, we kind of know them right off the bat. Like, it's no secret. It's right at the beginning of the book that we know that she has a drinking problem. It's obviously very fast that we learn about like what's happening and happened with like her career and her husband. So I appreciate that we know a lot of this off the bat. So we kind of know right away that she's a little bit of an unreliable narrator. You know, it gets the job done. And I do appreciate a flawed main character, to be honest. I like a main character with a lot of gray area. So she works for me. Don't love her, don't hate her, but she works for me. Like I said, she definitely has kind of a complex morality, a little bit more gray area, and as you get further into the book, that becomes more and more clear. But I still think generally at her core, like, we can trust that she's doing a lot of, maybe not all of what we would do, but things that are maybe mostly geared towards best interests of people. Not a ton of like character growth or anything like that. It's actually not a super character driven story. There's really just Casey. So it's really more of a plot driven story. I guess going off of what your preferences are, if you prefer, even obviously mysteries kind of have to at least be somewhat plot driven, but if you prefer something that's really more character driven, character developments occur. There's not like a ton of development. There's a little bit with Casey, but it's not like a hugely character driven story in my opinion. So that's just something to keep in mind, that it's definitely more on the plot side of things. Kind of going with the story, we'll start a little bit with the setup, because I thought that it was really great the way that he set up Casey as, I don't know, just somebody who's definitely gray, a little bit complex. The story itself was a little bit more what you would expect for probably 2/3 of the book, and then about 2/3 of the way through the book, kind of as we're approaching the climax, there start to be a lot of twists and turns. And I definitely did not anticipate these twists and turns. Wow, it was kind of like bam, 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 one after the other. And I'm not going to say that I hated them or anything, but I do think that to a certain extent they took me a little bit out of the story that I was experiencing. Some of them seemed a little bit like, whoa, out of left field, and they still made, I guess, enough sense, but I'm not so sure how I feel about those. If you've read it, let me know if you enjoyed like the climax and a lot of those twists. I'll just say I'm unsure how I feel about them. My thoughts are very mixed on those, but I think up until that, it was definitely really interesting setup. It seems like kind of a classic, like, woman goes missing, there was a fight, all that kind of stuff. Probably the first like big reveal I really enjoyed, but after that it almost felt like there were too many reveals, if that makes sense. Like, the first big reveal was amazing, that was great, and I think that by adding other big reveals, it kind of took away from that and took away from the impact of that first one, which is kind of a bummer. And I don't know if sometimes people add extra like twists and reveals just to make it like crazier, or if sometimes you start writing a story and you're really actually not even sure how to like wrap it up. I don't know what the reasons are, but I enjoyed kind of the first big reveal, and the other ones following that to me felt like overkill. The writing itself was really enjoyable though. It was easy to get into and descriptive in a way that I could definitely conjure up images of the surroundings, the people, what was happening, and it all fit really well with the story. Sometimes the exposition did feel a little bit too obvious, but I feel like given some of what happens, this makes sense, because it could be kind of difficult to keep straight without that really clear exposition, because like I said, there are like a bunch of big reveals kind of all in a row, and I think that, yeah, that could potentially be confusing to readers, especially if you're like listening to audiobook and you're not paying super close attention. Like, I definitely understand why maybe there's really explicit exposition, but still it's not really my favorite, and honestly I would just rather be like shown than told what's happening, if that makes sense. So I would rather just you let the story kind of reveal it and assume that I can like connect some pretty basic dots. Again, like I said, there were a bunch of big reveals in a row, so I feel like that was so confusing maybe that, he had to do that to make sure people weren't confused. All in all, pretty mixed review. I feel like I would give this probably 3 out of 5 stars because, like I said, the writing was descriptive enough. It was an interesting enough setup. It didn't feel like anything really special, which was kind of a bummer because I've heard really good things about Riley Sager. But like I said, I actually really want to read some other things by him. So let me know, like, if you've read anything by this author before, what your favorite books are, like what you would say I absolutely have to read, because I wasn't really blown away by this. I thought it was just okay. Definitely finished it, was like glad I read it. It kept me pretty entertained, but not my favorite at all. Definitely more plot driven than character driven. Definitely has some kind of more obvious exposition, but also some big twists. If you're really into like the unexpected and you prefer that over like the believable, then maybe you'll like this. But that's going to be it for this video, I think. I just don't have a ton of other thoughts on this. Thank you so much for watching. Like, subscribe, all that good stuff, and I will see you later.